My apologies. I had completely forgotten there was going to be an emergency alert. And considering how much of what I had taped for class I've already taped, I'm just going to finish up. But that scared the living daylights out of me, let me tell you. So now you know when I'm recording this. It happens to be Wednesday afternoon. Right around 2:20 at the time of the emergency alert. And what I was talking about were some of the conventions of writing, and that ultimately, if you were writing well, you would have topic sentences, first sentences that summarize what your paragraph is about. So basically, in this particular instance, if you have a well written piece of writing, what you can do is read just your first sentences and basically get a summary of what your paragraph was and what your whole essay was about if you read the first sentences. Um, Keep in mind that while you might have heard about the 5 paragraph essay, you need to have a beginning, you need to have a middle, and usually 3 pieces of context of evidence and details in the middle and the ending. That's bare bones minimum. Just like it's bare bones minimum to have 3 sentences in a paragraph. What you want to make sure that you're doing is that you are providing enough body paragraphs so that ultimately you've got a strong argument. And that probably means you're writing more than a 5 paragraph essay. I tell you that right now. Especially if you keep to the first rule of writing, which is being concise, which means that you want to be able to go through each sentence and ask yourself, can I say this in fewer words? And if so, you probably should. I understand that means you're going to get a shorter paper. So usually when teachers talk about paper length, what they are talking about is argument, not necessarily language. So you don't want to have a lot of unnecessary language in there. So again, length comes from argument. I'd much rather read a shorter paper that is well written than a longer paper that has a lot of unnecessary language. In fact, I myself will oftentimes find that what I'm doing when I'm reading student papers or reading my own writing when I'm in the editing phase is just crossing things out that aren't necessary. Keep in mind that a sentence expresses a complete idea. Punctuation just helps to clarify meanings. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about all of this next class when I talk a little bit more about the handout. But using something like avoiding I is just considered to be wordy. So you don't have to say I think, I believe, I will argue. You can eliminate that. Or avoiding contractions, which is where you take 2 words like do and not, you combine them into one, don't. It's considered informal, and I was taught, as you can see with the handout that I have submitted or that I have uploaded, that I was taught in a very formal way, so better to say do not, cannot, will not, even though that means it is a little bit longer, so I understand that there's some contradiction here with what I just said, to try to be concise. And that said, if you use a contraction, it won't negatively impact your grade, but I will circle it. I was basically taught in a very conservative way, so I can't help myself. Avoiding slang, informal language that just has a greater possibility of being misunderstood. Usually slang is created by one group to exclude others. I think about what adolescents do. They create slang each generation to try to exclude adults. Sometimes the slang becomes mainstream, but there is a greater possibility of misunderstanding. So take a piece of slang that most of you probably understand, something like he was a cool person, meaning that the person was interesting or engaging. However, imagine if English was not your first language. There would probably be a greater probability, or at least possibility, of misunderstanding, especially if you had just learned that cool was related to temperature. And that's why we want to try to avoid slang, because we want to try to have some universality there. Same with trite expressions that are so overused that they no longer are considered to have any kind of originality associated with them. That said, like I had indicated, I'll talk a little bit more about this next class, as well as documentation. But this gives you an idea of some of the things to consider when writing a paper. And our attendance question, and this would be due Saturday on the 7th of October, is, and of course, if you need an extension, let me know. What topic are you considering for paper number 1 and why? What paper are you considering for topic number 1 and why? And again, you aren't necessarily put into a box, so if you do decide to talk about a topic and change your mind, that's fine. You don't have to commit to this, but I want you to start thinking about topics that you might want to pursue and why. And you can even say that you don't know at this particular point, but we do want to get to the point where you would know sooner rather than later. So what I'll do next class is I'll put some closure onto Girl and Popular Mechanics, any details that we didn't get to, as well as putting some closure on writing papers. Again, I apologize for that emergency alert that occurred during my first video, but I had, as you can see, about 6 minutes more to finish, so I just didn't want to re-record the entire thing. So my apologies again. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. And we will continue on next class, putting closure onto fiction and beginning our next unit, drama. Take care. Bye-bye.